For such a sensitive guy, Mike Elko did not mince words when talking about Texas A&M's new annual opponent, your Missouri Tigers.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso, and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. On today's program, got more superlatives for the great Ahmad Hardy. Also going to dive even more deeply into the Missouri-South Carolina game, including a good question from a couple people. Why did Missouri decline that running into the kicker penalty late into the game? I think I have a pretty good explanation for that. Also, I want to start by reminding you today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket purchase. I have to say, I was mildly annoyed last season with Mike Elko, the Texas A&M coach, not because he put a beat down on Missouri. Of course, that was the most annoying part of all. But I get a little frustrated, especially going back to the Bob Stoops era, when it just seems like coaches just really reach for bulletin board material. I don't know why that's a pet peeve of mine, but it is. And last season, before the game, well, Brady Cook was basically asked about how loud it's going to be at Kyle Field for that game last season. And Brady basically said, hey, it's even louder in practice because they put these giant, concert quality type speakers behind you. And if you've ever been to a loud rock concert, hey, I've been to college football games, several all across the Midwest here, and in Columbia, South Carolina, several other places. So not just at the University of Missouri. I've never heard a football game that is as loud as a rock type concert can be when you're right up next to a rap, whatever the heck it is. The point is, when you're right up next to those kind of speakers, I mean, it's deafeningly loud, quite literally sometimes. So I just thought it was funny that Mike Elko, of course, made a lot of hay out of something there that was very meaningless and a very innocuous statement there by Brady Cook. So I did think it was kind of funny that Mike Elko, when asked about, the leaks from these permanent rivalries, he said, heck, Oklahoma, here, let me check and make sure that's correct, by the way. I think I have this correct here. Let's look it up. Here we go. Okay, Texas A&M, yes, their rivals are going to be Texas, of course, as you might expect, LSU, which is kind of an historic rivalry there, and then Missouri, to which Mike Elko responded, hey, basically Texas and LSU, 2 thumbs up, but Missouri, not really sure where they fit in there, but, quote, it is what it is. And in all seriousness, I have a similar reaction, and I think a lot of Missouri fans do too, to this Missouri-Texas A&M thing. In all seriousness, I think Mike Elko is pretty much right here. And I was just slightly disappointed because I would have preferred South Carolina. But I do have to say, the more I look at this, I'm starting to think that some of these the third team, if you will, I think there's a lot of examples of what Mike Elko said about his team that really apply to a lot of these annual rivalries that have been leaked out here. Again, this has all been confirmed, if not official here. That'll come here on Tuesday evening, I believe, on the SEC network. But regardless, it's starting to look more and more like, to me, I was sort of being tongue-in-cheek on yesterday's program about, we got a new every 4-year event here being created by the SEC. If you like a presidential cycle, if you like an Olympic cycle, we might just have an annual opponent reveal cycle as well. I think that really could be in play here. So Missouri and Texas A&M, for at least 4 years anyway, will be those annual rivals. We'll see what happens in 2029. And again, Mike Elko, his general again, I'm just basically being a jerk here and trying to put words into Mike Elko's mouth here, like I felt he did with my boy Brady Cook last season. But again, if I'm being fair, I had a very similar reaction. Basically, hey, not the end of the world. It is what it is. I had one listener say, those other teams have historic rivalries in the SEC. The SEC is not going to bend over backwards just so we're happy at the cost of other rivalries. There is no perfect match for every team. Well, certainly that is true, and if you were an everyday listener of this program, you know I've said throughout this entire time that I know that Missouri is not the number one priority here because, quite simply, since joining the SEC, there aren't any historic rivalries like the Iron Bowl, for example, that you need, or many other long-term, decades-long rivalries in the SEC that you want to keep intact. So obviously Missouri's not going to be the top priority here. And yet still, I just thought, I don't think while that's certainly a valid point, I'm not sure how valid it is in this particular case. Because you look at who you look at who South Carolina got for its third opponent. That was Kentucky among its annual rival. That's not exactly an historic rivalry there. And while the person pointed out, well, hey, they've played 36 times, they being Kentucky and South Carolina, versus the Mayor's Cup's been played 15 times. Well, again, I get it, but how many of those 36 matchups are actually memorable? Because I can think of quite a few off the top of my head between Missouri and South Carolina. Again, none of this is the end of the world, but it just seemed like when my colleague Chris Marler was indicating that he thought it was probably going to happen, that is the Mayor's Cup continuing on an annual basis, I guess I just kind of got my hopes up a little bit and sort of got used to the idea of that happening. And quite frankly, the Texas A&M thing just doesn't do a lot for me, and it doesn't seem to do a lot for Texas A&M fans either. And understandably so, and if I might speak for Aggies and Missouri fans a little bit here, I have a feeling that both fan bases, if they're feeling slightly underwhelmed by this news here, it's probably because, well, both fan bases have been here before. Of course, the first couple years in 2013 and 2012, Missouri and Texas A&M, that was going to be their singular crossover rival between East and West. Well, that lasted for a couple seasons and then entered the Ozark Bowl between Missouri and Arkansas. And by the way, to all the people who felt the need to point out, hey, John, Missouri and Texas A&M entered the Big 12 at the same time. Yes, thank you guys. I really appreciate that reminder. But anyway, what matters, some people said also that, hey, Texas A&M, it's all about quality of opponent. Well, Texas A&M historically has certainly been the better program than South Carolina. Recently, though, over the last 10 years or so, 5 to 10 years, that isn't necessarily always the case. So I don't know. I'm just not that certain on the future of this whole thing as far as who's actually going to be the more challenging opponent. That didn't really factor in to my thinking here, to be honest with you. Again, ultimately, I think the SEC is probably going to want to revisit this every 4 years, and the way they've set it up, I think they kind of have set it up so they can rotate the Rubik's Cube at least one turn every 4 years and change things up a little bit. I feel like that's where we're headed. Hey, you know what? Listener Mike has a really good question. Missouri on 4th down and 7 got a running into the kicker penalty on a punt. Well, some people thought that should have been a roughing the kicker penalty. I'll address that as well. Also, Eli Drinkwitz says on Ahmad Hardy, I didn't think he was going to be this good. Let's be honest. Well, excuse me if I raise my hand and say I did think he was going to be this good, and I have the receipts to prove it. But regardless, some more superlatives coming up here on Ahmad Hardy in just a minute. But first, this episode is brought to you by Square, your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. And places like action, sports, and card collectibles in Kansas City, these are the type of places that really need Square. And when a neighborhood businesses thrive, the whole neighborhood thrives. Square is a proud partner of more than 4 million neighborhood businesses around the world. You can go to square.com/go/lockedoncollege to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. And if you're looking for last-minute tickets to homecoming, of course, Game Time is absolutely the place to be, with no endless queues, hidden fees, or prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time. It's as simple as it can possibly be. And again, for homecoming, hey, $67 to get in the stadium. You wait even longer, you can gamble, and maybe things will get even cheaper. Also, zone deals, pick the section. Game Time picks the seats, and you save big money. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go, download Game Time today. So again, listener Mike Hodge, I thought, had a good question that I should address. Why did we decline the penalty on the punt? Running into the kicker would have been 4th down and 2. Maybe Missouri should have tried a hard count. Also, if we end up punting after accepting the penalty, we could have pinned them deeper. Curious if I am missing something. Well, frankly, at the time, I had that thought as well, but I was glad that Missouri ultimately declined the penalty. That's the move I would have made too, simply just out of pure respect for the South Carolina punt returner, Vakari Swain. I went back and watched the broadcast there, and the ESPN people correctly pointed out that Swain already has 3 punt returns for touchdowns on this young season. That's a crazy, crazy amount to already have. It shows what a dangerous player he is. So even though that was not the greatest Missouri punt in the world, at least it wasn't returnable. At least it, we got 35 maybe net yards out of it, it looked like to me. I didn't really bother doing the exact math because that really wasn't the point. More the point was, well, should Missouri have not only tried to kick it again, but hey, maybe try to draw South Carolina offsides? There's an argument to be made for that. There really is. But I think, to me, just in that point of the game, how the game was playing out, I just would have rather trusted the Missouri defense and quite simply just keep the ball out of Swain's hands. I'm guessing that's what Eli Drinkwitz's logic was for the most part there, because more than likely South Carolina isn't going to jump offside, so then you're back to the same position, by the way, and now it's 4th and 7. You're kicking to Swain again. So ultimately, that's the decision I would have made. And I'm happy that Eli Drinkwitz made it. Obviously, it ends up paying off. South Carolina takes over at its own 31-yard line. Again, wasn't the greatest punt in the world. It was far from the worst, that's for sure either. If you remember, again, back to Kentucky in 2018, everybody seems to remember the rather dubious pass interference as time expired. I remember what in the heck was Missouri doing, kicking to Lynn Bowden, a guy who ends up playing in the NFL for a little while, returns the kick for a touchdown in a game where Kentucky really could barely even get a first down, much less a touchdown offensively in the ball game. But regardless, I think this is worth pointing out as well. The referees, at least in my opinion and my understanding of the rules, I hate to say it, I think they made the right call, too. I think the targeting play on Bo Perbula, now I'm going to throw up my hands there. When people thought, well, that targeting play was reviewed, I'm still not sure what targeting is. But I am pretty sure I know the difference between roughing the punter and running into the punter. Basically, if you run into the punter's kicking leg, well, that's going to be a 5-yard penalty. If you run into his plant leg, that's when it becomes a 15-yard penalty. And it sure looked like it sure looked like Connor Wesselman, the Gamecock, ran into his kicking leg and spun him around. So whether you agree with that rule or not, that is, I believe, how it is interpreted. And again, Eli Drinkwitz said on Ahmad Hardy, the Mizzou running back, who got to still be the favorite for the Doak Walker right now in Vegas, I would think, over at FanDuel. But he said, I didn't think he was going to be this good. Let's be honest. Well, once again, I sure did personally, but I think that's more Eli Drinkwitz just trying to explain how good Hardy has been so far. And he seems to be just getting better and more comfortable in this Missouri offense here as the games are going along, though, heck, he's had over 100 yards in every game. That's a tough thing to pull off. Eli continues here, said, the kid's running through people like a dump truck. He's a Clydesdale amongst fillies. Gotta love that horse analogy there. He left his feet, came back, and had the balance to still score. Ain't ever seen that on tape before, and I commented on that on my X feed, by the way. That clip was out there, that specific clip where Hardy scored that late touchdown. That was something I don't think I've ever quite seen before, and just the balance and power and utter determination there by Hardy is really, really fun to watch. Man, is he a good player or what? And speaking of good players, that Missouri front six, do you want to call it? Front seven, certainly the front four right now. The whole thing, really, just the linebackers and the defensive line I'm referring to, of course, for Missouri, have just been stupendous, really, so far, especially against the run. But, man, the Tigers were really good in pass rush as well. Not only the Tigers give up negative yardage, well, 27 pressures on Saturday night. The Tigers averaged just over 12 per game coming in to the South Carolina ball game. So 27 pressures. That was only with 4 blitzes called in the entire game. This data according to Pro Football Focus. So again, you're getting that kind of pressure and you're not blitzing. Wow, that is a great sign for the Missouri pass rush going forward. But obviously Missouri's got to clean some stuff up on the back end. I will say this, though. Some of those throws by Lenora Sellers were absolute dimes, and his arm talent is very, very obvious. Some people think he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft this coming 2026. There's real obvious reasons for that. And in 2 combined games against Mizzou, by the way, Sellers has 39 completions on 58 attempts, 655 total yards, and 7 touchdowns. By the way, it could have been worse, too, on some of those plays. But, again, Missouri's got a lot of things to clean up, but you got to give Lenora Sellers some credit, too, especially being able to pull off a 300-plus yard game, being under that kind of pressure. It's impressive stuff, and most importantly for Missouri fans, some really impressive stuff by that Missouri defensive line in particular against South Carolina. And while I've pointed out some great trends for Missouri, there is one trend that is worrying me a little bit, and I'm not just talking about the pass defense either. So let's talk about that. But first, Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. And Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IISH Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. And with all-wheel drive standard and every crossover SUV, by the way, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. And like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. Now, much has been made, especially the last couple seasons, about Missouri's really excellent record, quite honestly, in one-score games, and frankly, just how sustainable that is in the long term. Well, as I've pointed out, not all one-score games are created equally, and also, there are games that are basically, they sure feel a heck of a lot like one-score games, even if they don't end up that way. And I'd say the same thing about Kansas and the South Carolina games where, hey, with a few minutes to go in the ball game, well, Kansas was leading. South Carolina was certainly within one possession, and the Tigers, well, close it out, hit the field goal to ice it and make it a 9-point ball game. So 1 point ahead of one possession. So even though that won't go down in the, hey, the Tigers won a close one, it kind of should have, because, and here's the part of the trend that I don't love. And hopefully Missouri will get better at this as we go along. And maybe this is actually a positive thing, because anytime from a coach's perspective, if you can, well, keep winning ball games and have something to still grind on your team about, maybe that is a good thing. Because late against Kansas, again, Tigers were still trailing with a few minutes to go. I was thinking, we should be winning this game. We really should be. And I thought the same thing. Not only should we be winning, but we should be winning by more, especially against halftime. At halftime of the South Carolina game, I wrote down bad interception, special teams, red zone, and big plays given up. That's why the, quote, better side, to steal a soccer term, is trailing. So this idea that, hey, it feels like Missouri's mostly dominating the game, and yet, well, the teams, again, South Carolina and Kansas, were obviously hanging in there toward basically until the very end. I don't love that trend, obviously, and it felt like, again, the South Carolina game, the very end of it, did feel a little bit like the KU game, but not in a good way. I'll just say that. So obviously Missouri has some things to shore up. Again, it wasn't just the back end miscommunications and pass defense. I thought special teams clearly need some work, and the red zone at times needs some work as well, and that's going to be one of those things that's going to ebb and flow a little bit from game to game. That's for darn sure. And by the way, since I brought up Kansas, well, at least once or twice on this episode, one more thing here to close out the show. Did you notice that Kansas and Arizona State, I don't know if this is official yet, maybe it is by now, but there is a lot of talk of Kansas and Arizona State potentially playing in London next season. So just like we had Farmageddon, Iowa State, and Kansas State in Ireland this past season to open up the year, week 0 was the biggest week 0 game. It looks like, well, KU and Arizona State might be doing that too. And I got to say, call me a skeptic, but I just don't understand why anybody thinks college football is going to take off overseas. Are there really enough American expats over there to make this a worthwhile endeavor? Somebody's got to explain it to me. I really don't understand it whatsoever. If it's the NFL, hey, I understand that. Obviously, that's the highest level of American football. That seems like an easier sell to people who have no connection to American universities, for example. Like, for example, I enjoy watching European soccer on occasion. I don't know why I would want to watch minor league European soccer, though. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but what do I know? Maybe this is something that's really going to work and cause major dollars to flow into the Big 12 coffers. So London, it's not just for the Jacksonville Jaguars anymore, baby. It's for the Kansas Jayhawks and the Arizona State Sun Devils as well. Again, call me a skeptic on this idea. And frankly, sending over Kansas, is that really good relations? Don't we want to keep good relations with America and Europe? I thought we had the special relationship. I don't know that this is going to be doing a lot for that. You send Kansas football anywhere, and you're probably going to end up in some type of counseling. But hey, thanks as always for listening to Locked On Mizzou. Hopefully I've been your special sports type of counselor today. And once again, by the way, on Fire TV, check out Locked On College Football's College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. And until Wednesday, I am John Miller, and this has been Locked On Mizzou.